Nigeria's Vice President, Yemi Osinbajo, has stressed the need for Nigeria to remain an indivisible country for necessary development to take place. Osinbajo was speaking in London during an interactive session with top officials of the Nigerian High Commission in the United Kingdom. He says the current myriad of challenges the nation is facing will soon become history. Vice President Osinbajo says Nigerians at home and in diaspora should promote the message of one country, noting that anybody who looks at how Nigeria operates will recognize that we are better off in this system, and that is the truth. Tundu, is that the truth?
Yes, I think it's the truth that we are better off as one country. But the concerns and the agitations that people have expressed are not as easily dismissed as the Vice President is saying. People don't need to be told to spread the message of one Nigeria. If they are made to believe in one Nigeria, they will spread that message by their own volition. The issue now is that there are genuine feelings of marginalization, of alienation. Some people feel like second-class citizens in their own country. That is the fact. I feel that we're better off as one country for the simple reason that anything to avoid bloodshed because of personal experience, dying for one's country, as I've often quoted, Dulce est decorum, pro patria mori, is a lie. It is not sweet and fitting to die for your country. It's a sweet and fitting to die with a head full of gray hair, in your bed, surrounded by everybody who loves you, not cut down in blood, okay? So that is the perspective that I'm coming from. There's going to be no neat balkanization of Nigeria. It will be a bloody war. And if you go even as far back as India and Pakistan, that partition, and how many people died, needlessly, I feel. Look at what happened with, where the word balkanization comes from, that part of Europe, the Yugoslavia war, with genocide.
Yes.
Do we need this? Even Sudan, we don't need that. So that's why, for me, just that bloodshed, for me, is enough of a deterrent for us to sit down and work out our problems. That's just where I'm coming from with that.
Dr. Abati?
Well, I think it's important to know that the Vice President has been very consistent in calling for unity. And he echoes also the official position of the federal government of Nigeria, relying heavily on Section 2 of the Constitution, which says Nigeria is a sovereign state, it is indissoluble, and many people do not like to hear that. But you do not expect that the Vice President of Nigeria will go to any forum, either local or international, and be seen to be supporting those who are calling for, the dismemberment of Nigeria. Every Nigerian president and their deputies will say, well, Nigeria will not break up on our watch. And with regard to the statement made by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, yes, this is not the first time he will make a similar statement. And what he was trying to celebrate on that occasion is the unity of Nigeria, and promote the unity of Nigeria and the diversity of Nigeria. Many people argue that, yes, there is strength in diversity, and that the diversity that we have in this country is an advantage rather than a disadvantage. And he tried to compare Nigeria with smaller nations that are also trying to become bigger, either through increase in population or through, some other, ways of making sure that they stand tall within the international community. And he's of the view also that, look, if Igbos stand on their own, or Yorubas stand on their own, or some other groups stand on their own, in a country of over 400 ethnic nationalities, you will just end up in a small country. But that Nigeria is able to play big in the international community because of our size, our diversity, and the talent, the summative, collective talents of the people. However, many of those who are calling for self-determination, many who are, beating the drums of secession, many of those groups are not saying we want to leave Nigeria by all means. They say, okay, if it is not possible to have this kind of Nigeria, then perhaps it is better for them to go their way. At least I've, had that kind of rhetoric. What are they complaining about? Marginalization, injustice, nepotism, the superiorization of certain groups and the inferiorization of certain other groups. So out of, concern, out of self-preservation, you now have so many groups saying we'd rather stand on our own. As a statesman, I think that beyond, talking to people and saying we are better off together, the government of the day or any other government at the subnational level should take steps to ensure that the unity that our leaders talk about, that unity is effectuated in terms of how the government is run. Many of the people who want to run away from Nigeria is because they are frustrated with many of the fault lines within the Nigerian arrangement. You cannot, on one hand, as a political leader, say we are better off together. And then, some people get the impression that they are not good enough for the top job because they are from a particular part of the country. Or some people will feel that, people from their own part of the country cannot have access to certain institutions of state or certain opportunities. When the same constitution that political leaders often quote to promote the idea of unity is very clear in section 42 thereof, the right to live inside Nigeria without being discriminated against, either on the basis of ethnicity, gender, religion, or circumstances of birth. So these are the pillars already provided, as fundamental issues within the Constitution that government and our leaders, should promote. And when that is done, perhaps more Nigerians will have a sense of inclusion. Perhaps fewer Nigerians will want to leave the country. And the rhetoric about, divisiveness would not be there. So this is where we have found ourselves. And, it's not enough to just say this. We've been bearing this burden long before now. So it's not as if we're saying the Buhari administration created the prevailing situation. It's part of the fault lines, the failure of the Nigerian leadership to build a nation, in the truest sense, after independence. And I have a position on this. I don't like to blame outsiders because standard excuse is to say, the British structured Nigeria to fail. The British, they left since 1960. What have we done with Nigeria? When will Nigeria become a nation? When will everybody have a sense of, belonging and ownership of the Nigerian project?
I mean, very well said, Dr. Batiantunde. I think the most important thing is it is time for us to stop paying lip service to this talk about unity and actually doing the hard work of unity and reconciliation in this country. We need to heal broken hearts. I think the work started with Olusegun Obasanjo, with the Puta panel, human rights violation, looking back at that, trying to heal some broken hearts. I think we should constantly have that soul search in our country. And we should constantly have forums where we talk about our country and the forums of our country. I think it's the hard work, it is the prose of governance that we have failed at. But we have trumped up the narrative and the poetry of unity every time, which is good, which is great. But poetry is poetry and action is action. I think it is time for us to do that work of unity, and it should be seen. If it is seen, you will not need to remind every Nigerian that we should stand together. Automatically, they will stand together, they will live by the flag, they will uphold the flag, and they will say they are proud to be Nigerians. It's time for action, not talk. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you. That's all on the headline news. We take a short break. When we return, we'll have Michael Wilson, Adeso Amora, Aaron Akerejola to give us updates on global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Morning Show here on Arise News. Well, we've been joined now by Michael Wilson, who's joining us from London with the Global Business Update. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Great hair, if I may say so. Looks good.
Thank you.
So let us get on to what ought to be a sort of comeback trail for equities this week. Going to be a stellar earnings season, we think. Big banks reporting in the United States, getting over the disappointment of those jobs figures on Friday, and the attention will be shifting to inflation this week. I know we love to talk about inflation, and it's the big figures, which I'll come on to later on. So as far as Asia Pacific is concerned, then very mixed, mostly higher really in morning trade, particularly Meituan in Hong Kong, the food delivery service, up more than 7%. I'll come on to that. Travel stocks in Singapore also up because they're opening vaccinated travel lanes to more than eight more countries: Canada, Denmark, France, Italy, Netherlands, Spain, the UK, and the US, getting speedy speedy entry into that country. So China's stocks then surging after the food delivery giant Meituan was fined $534 million. Why would any shares rise in a company that's been fined that much? Well, in this case, it's acceptable. The amount is about acceptable. And it's also, as the market puts it, removes the overhang from the value of the shares. In other words, things are relatively clear. So as far as Hong Kong's concerned, Chinese giants also rising, tech giants up there, including Tencent, Alibaba, but, and here's the big one, what's going to happen to Evergrande this week? Will it move any closer to paying its foreign creditors? Possibly not. Domestic ones, possibly. That's really what we're thinking at the moment. A lot of waffle, really, from China and the US over trade in the early part of the weekend. I told you that the trade representative, Catherine Tai, and China's vice premier were meeting together virtually. They're all seeking frank trade talks, as they put it. The Chinese side, this is a quote, negotiated over the cancellation of tariffs and sanctions and clarified its position on China's economic development model and industrial policies. I mean, basically, it doesn't say a great deal, but at least they're talking. And as I've been telling you, there is this virtual summit coming up towards the end of the year between the president of China and the president of the United States. Now, down to more concrete or more solid matters, and China's coal futures absolutely hugely up 16%. If you follow these kind of things, the cost of a ton of coal is now $218. Doesn't mean anything to me, but I'm just telling you that's what the price is right now. And the problem here is that floods have hit some of the mines in China. 100,000 people have been displaced from their normal homes and their normal places of work. Now, in any other country, 100,000 people displaced is massive news. In China, they're relatively quiet about it. I got this from a Chinese news service. US recap, well, all right, so it's start of the earnings season this week, as you know, all the big ones and so on. Really, it's a question of how much the banks have actually been forced to spend on expenses. Surging oil prices, of course, but a disappointing jobs report on Friday. So all that to come. I suspect it probably will be a stellar earnings week for banks, but we will see. Overall, globally, nations have agreed to more or less to a 15% minimum corporation tax. Most of the world's nations are signed up to it, including the UK, and it looks like the United States, one of the laggards, is going to do that. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says over the weekend, she's been saying she's quite positive that there will be approval from United States lawmakers. Sydney, the capital of Australia, or at least the tourist capital of Australia, celebrates its Freedom Day as it opens in Australia. Sydney's cafes, gyms, restaurants, the rest of it are open. Other states, though, within Australia are looking at this with interest to find out if we actually can, or they can, particularly live under COVID. Do remember that you've got elections coming up, Prime Minister Scott Morrison elections coming up in May. So basically, a lot of other states are looking at what happens in Sydney to see, is it going to be okay? Australia is planning a staggered return to normal, country free for entry. In other words, us entering Australia, should we wish to, from November. As far as the energy crisis is concerned, Moscow's been urging the EU to better its ties with Moscow to avoid gas shortages. Stop treating Russia as an adversary. Mend ties and be nice to each other. That insists Russia has nothing to do with gas shortages, even though Putin, of course, has direct links to the state energy provider Gazprom. UK energy prices, how it's being handled here. No commitment from the Energy Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, about any help from business at all as far as business is concerned. They'll probably be doing it with themselves, including energy-intensive industries like steel and so on. Director General of UK Steel says he's been frustrated by the lack of government damage to the UK steel sector. And the Unite leader, that is a union, the Unite leader, has been saying that companies will have to close. We'll talk a little bit about more supply chains, if you wish, when you start to question me after this report. I've got a lot to tell you about that. UK, promise of cash injection, though. This is a private company into Liberty Steel from its Chinese owners. They're getting over the business of GFG Alliance, which is the parent company, is getting over what happened to it since Greenshill collapsed. That was its main Union says it's welcome and long overdue, and we have these continuing investigations as far as Credit Suisse are concerned. Their role in the Greensill thing. Oil prices continue upwards. So then, a big week coming up. Fed minutes, first of all, on Wednesday. We'll find out a little bit more about what they think about where the economy is going. That's always quite valuable from the United States. UK jobs for August. We get that tomorrow. The employment picture gradually beginning to improve, but not much. China trade, we get that on Wednesday as well. The trade numbers were slightly better than expected, despite sort of disruption there the last time we saw them. So we'll be looking with interest at that. And we get inflation and retail sales from the United States as the week comes to an end. So there will be a lot to think about. That's the global view.
All right. Real quickly, let's start from Credit Suisse. Isn't it a terrible time for Credit Suisse now? They've been fingered in the Greensill deal now. And let's not forget Evergrande. Credit Suisse did help Evergrande to sell those bonds. You know, how are they going to wriggle their way out of this? And secondly, let's talk about energy in the UK. Kwesi Kwarteng, the business secretary, is saying that he wants sort of like a bailout scheme of some sort, you know, for these energy companies to be able to regulate prices and the likes. But Rishi Sunak is saying he's not talked to me about that. So why should he be saying that? So there's this back and forth between the energy scribe, business scribe, and Rishi Sunak as regards bailouts. Do you think Rishi has the money to give to all these energy companies?
I think the question should be, do I have the money to give to the energy companies? Not the Chancellor. The business minister asks, the Treasury says no. That's its job. That's what the Treasury actually does. There are all sorts of problems and paying for this crisis right now. What's actually happening in the UK, I think, is very, very important indeed. Sure, the business secretary is asking for something, but he's also, on his other side, saying to industry, there will be no government help and the price cap for users will stay on until next year. Now, what's actually happening is this, that the previous boss of Tesco, which, as you know, is a huge UK supermarket called Dave. Oh gosh, what's his name? Dave
Lewis.
No, it's David
Lewis.
Oh, Dave Lewis. Dave Lewis. That's right. Yeah, thank you, Dave Lewis. Now this is actually quite important. I'm from Yorkshire, which is a place in the north of England, and we have this saying: "When in doubt, do not." In other words, when in doubt, do nothing. I've got an addition to that. When in doubt, do not. Get somebody who knows what it's all about. And Dave Lewis knows about supply chains. He's been recruited by the government. Much too late, I think, but to try to solve some of the supply chain problems. He'd been part of a supermarket. He knows about supply chains, and let's hope that he can actually inject some kind of, because he'll be able to go to industry and say, I don't believe what you're saying. I used to boss Tesco. I know what supply chains are all about, because everybody wants to pull the wool over people's eyes as they start to investigate what's gone wrong with supply chains, knowing that the truth of it all is, the absolute bottom truth is, that we all want all this kind of stuff in time rather than just in case. We want it just in time. So we are going to have to pay for that. It makes supply chains very thin. As far as Credit Suisse is concerned, as I said last week, to be absolutely honest, I prefer to leave that to the lawyers, only because I'm sure that your lawyers are not particularly as big maybe as Credit Suisse. Maybe they are, I don't know. But I think this is going to get deep into legal stuff, and I think it's best left alone. But I would say that there is an internal investigation going on into Credit Suisse, which has now been postponed for a few days until actually something comes out of that. So things not looking very good for Credit Suisse. I think that's as far as I wish to go as far as Credit Suisse is concerned, because we will still have to wait for the legal issues to actually fall out of the tree.
World Bank annual meetings, starting today. Discussions haven't been going since Friday. It's about global recovery, supply chain issues, and all of that. The big issues. It looks like the fate of the IMF managing director, Kristalina Georgieva, seems to be hanging in balance over that Winner Hill report with regard to the doing business report that she superintended over when she was still with the World Bank. US and Japan want her out. Other countries think, well, It's not a big deal. What do you think is likely to happen? And then 136 countries. Okay.
Ms. Georgieva will have to. She'll have to ride this. I mean, it's going. There, as you say, there are big discussions taking place in the IMF today, and they will be overshadowed by all this, particularly if one's CEO is coming under such kind of scrutiny. It won't help the IMF, and the IMF, I think, has a fairly checkered history as far as helping developing countries is concerned as well. So I think that they've got a very, very hard task to convince sceptical members of it, particularly big donors like the United States, like Japan, and like the EU, that they've actually got this under control, because it is a very, very serious overhang from a previous existence that Ms. Georgieva actually had.
I was going to bring up the issue of, the 136 countries agreeing now to minimum corporation tax of 15% to address the challenge of profit shifting and tax evasion. Who are the winners and losers? Countries like Ireland, Estonia, Hungary, that objected before now, they've now signed up to it. So what is the significance of this development, considering that some of the countries that signed up are still protesting? Like Argentina, for example, says, look, they think 21% should be more realistic. And a group like Oxfam is also saying not much has been achieved.
I think the idea of a universal tax, it levels the playing field, as they put it. But actually, if you're in charge of a company, you're not just thinking about corporation tax. You think about the holistic total of what's actually going on within the country that you're going to invest in. So does this mean that Ireland will therefore lose its competitive advantage? No, I don't think it will. I think that Ireland has a very strong tradition of clean corporate governance, and that's where. And if I headquartered my company in Ireland, I think I would be quite happy about that. If it were in Estonia, I know nothing about Estonia, to be honest. I mean, if it's been attracting low tax conscious companies, well, good luck to them. But I know nothing about their corporate governance. I know nothing about. I don't even know what their law is. What is the constitutional law of Estonia? Got no idea. I know what it is in the UK. I know what it is in the US. I think that once the US joins up to this, which Janet Yellen is relatively confident about, then I think we've got a deal. And until that, I think it's a lot of countries saying, yes, we think it's a good idea. Yes, we'll sign on to it. But it's much more than just tax. If you're headquartering or you've got a part of your company in a particular country, there are all sorts of things to consider, and tax is just one of them. It's important, but it's not the whole thing.
Well, I'm sure our viewers will be interested to know that Nigeria is yet to sign up to the plan alongside other countries like Kenya, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. Well, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Rufai?
All right, thank you so much. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adeso Omorua is here with us. Adeso Omorua, you have been cleared. You have been cleared. Everything is cleared now. Yes.
The Mama Put General of right?
How very dare you?
On your behalf.
You are cleared.
And we are grateful on your behalf.
You are cleared.
Thank you very much, Tundu.
Thank you, Tundu.
But did you have to refer to me as a Mama Put General? I mean, really?
You are cleared.
No, you are the one who makes sure we get fed when those parties.
I enjoy it. I'm a servant. I enjoy it.
The most important thing, she's cleared now.
You're good.
Okay.
Yes. Mama Put General.
Where's Mr. Ifedi from back up? Mr. Ifedi will not have this kind of treatment.
No, I wouldn't let them call you Mama Put General again. Oh, sorry. Why would they call you Mama Put General? Like Mama Put General?
By the way, Tundu, you look absolutely lovely this morning, Tundu. I love the hair.
Thank you.
All right, so I cannot overemphasize enough how this pandemic is all about data wherever you look, and I've got more data for you this morning. In the first worldwide estimate of the mental health impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, researchers now estimate that the year 2020 saw an additional 52 million people suffer from major depressive disorder. An additional 76 million cases of anxiety were also recorded globally. The study shows that those most affected are women and young adults. So we're having the pandemic, we're having pandemics within the pandemic, and the list is long of the effects of COVID-19, some of which we don't even see just yet. But this comes as more countries over the weekend announced reaching herd immunity by fully vaccinating at least 80% of their population. And Italy, as well as Portugal, are the latest countries to reach the milestone. While China is claiming to be responsible for about half of the vaccines used globally, either for local consumption or exports to other countries. However, this has not been verified because China isn't so keen or big on revealing its data for scrutiny. However, they claim they have used up half of the 6.4 billion doses of vaccines against the virus being administered globally as at the moment, some locally, some exported to other countries, as I said. While global infections have also crossed the 237 million mark with over 4.8 million deaths. Here in Nigeria, let's take a quick look at the data. 78 new cases of COVID-19 and 1 COVID-19 related death recorded from 10 states and the FCT in the last 24 hours. Lagos posted 22 new cases for the period, while Kaduna and the FCT posted a combined 22 cases. Let's bring up the data for vaccination in Nigeria if we can, because I want you to see the breakdown of vaccination by states. We can have that vaccination update in Nigeria. Now, the first and second doses are what you see on the vaccination updates for Nigeria. Let me tell you that it shows, for those who cannot see it properly, because that's 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory, first doses and second doses, so the print may be too small for you to see. It shows that Bayelsa State, which is in the south region of the country, has administered the least doses, with just 36,069 people receiving a first dose and another 12,115 others receiving a second dose. That's for Bayelsa State, and it's the least on that data you see there. Lagos, on the other hand, has administered the most doses in both phases. That's the phase 1 and phase 2. Remember that vaccines are free in Nigeria, and it's for those 18 and above. Away from Nigeria, despite the unequal vaccination drive across the world, we continue to see vaccine wastages. But it becomes more worrisome when it's on the continent of Africa, where only barely 15 countries have fully vaccinated 10% of their population. In Egypt, to be precise, the public prosecution yesterday revealed that it had ordered the arrest of 3 people after thousands of unused vaccines were found dumped along a water channel. In the statement, the public prosecutor said, in the city of Minya alone, Minya is very close to Cairo, it says 18,400 vaccine packages with a value of more than $319,000 or 5 million Egyptian pounds were found to be missing. It also says an inventory found nearly 5,000 more packages had been lost from the depot because of storage at improper temperatures. But there was no mention of the type of vaccine in this latest statement. However, earlier in Egypt, we've heard stories about the Chinese vaccine Sinopharm being dumped. And away from that, barely 72 hours after it announced it would build a $500 million vaccine factory in Africa, Moderna has been accused of supplying its shots almost exclusively to wealthy nations, keeping poorer countries waiting and earning billions in profits. The report reveals that Moderna had shipped the least to low-income countries when you compare to other pharmaceutical companies. Moderna has done just about 1 million doses when you compare with 8.4 million by Pfizer, 25 million by Johnson & Johnson, and even more by the AstraZeneca. And finally, this morning, whistleblowing doctors have testified against Sao Paulo hospital operator Prevent Sinor, accusing it of testing drugs without proper consent and forcing doctors to prescribe unproven drugs. Some politicians have also accused this healthcare of falsifying COVID deaths. But the doctors are saying that they were told to prescribe the unproven drugs hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin to patients. Recall that the hydroxychloroquine, beg your pardon, has been touted by Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, but extensive research worldwide and the global health body, the WHO, has said there's not enough data to prove that it actually helps the situation with COVID-19 patients. That's the update, guys.
Okay, maybe we'll start with Brazil. You know, opinion is divided along ideological lines over how the COVID-19 situation should be managed in that country. You have, on one hand, those who are, you know, are following science and global standards, and then you have, you know, our President Jair Bolsonaro and his allies who have been accused of having created a problematic situation in that country, either because they do not believe in the science or they do not want to get, you know, vaccinated. But the bigger issue is this case with Provide Senior, which was a company that was set up in 2017 to provide opportunities for persons or families, you know, who could not meet up with the high cost of treatment within the public health system. However, the main issue at the moment, which was addressed last week by the Senate of Brazil, because an investigation has been launched, is the distribution of what is called a COVID kit, containing majorly, you know, drugs that are said to have been prescribed by President Bolsonaro under what he calls early treatment. That the early treatment procedure should include hydroxychloroquine, which you have mentioned, which is not approved as a treatment for COVID-19, ivermectin, which you have mentioned, and then there's a third drug, flutamide. You know, but what is the response of Provide Senior? They claim that basically they don't administer these drugs except the families, you know, family members of the patients approve. But whistleblowing doctors who testified in the Senate last week made it clear that no, these doctors are pressurized to administer these drugs. And what you have is a tragic situation that has a presidential endorsement. But the investigations are continuing, and there are persons who are arguing that, look, the investigation should go beyond this particular medical chain, Provide Senior, and also involve other, you know, medical service providers in Brazil because of the, you know, crisis, the lack of clarity, the confusion with regard to how the COVID pandemic should be managed in that country. But the key issue will seem to be leadership and the role played by President Jair Bolsonaro himself. Moderna is considered the premium vaccine. Sometime last year, it was considered to be at the same level with the Pfizer vaccine because both rely on more or less the same technology. But it was then found that Moderna, which was the production of which was supported by the U.S. government through the National Public Institute with about $1.3 billion. It was then found that it's more cost effective, it is more effective, and that it lasts longer. But the big problem is that Moderna has been accused by the WHO, even by the National Institute, and also by a research organization that provided the details that you quoted earlier, to be more interested in profit. And that, in fact, it says at a higher premium to underprivileged, low to middle income countries, which will seem to run against the grain of this call by WHO, WTO, world leaders for vaccine equity. You'll recall the strategy that was announced last week by the WHO, the strategy till 2024 with regard to the management of COVID-19. One major paragraph there is the role of vaccine manufacturers and how they should prioritize poor countries, how they should provide support, how they should ramp up production. But Tunisia made an order from Moderna. Up to now, they can't get it. Moderna is promising to collaborate with African Union to sell a dose of the vaccine to Africa at $10 per dose. But they claim also that those vaccines will not be available until towards the end of next year. So these are some of the contradictions that who will call Moderna to order, other than the moral statements that the international community and the National Institute of Public Health in the U.S. continue to make.
Well, maybe the Biden administration, because you'll recall that the U.S. government is a co-investor in that vaccine, and they are also expressing huge problems with Moderna's attitude. Sure. Their priority is meeting the promise made by Joe Biden. wanting America to be this huge vaccine arsenal to the world. And Moderna, as this story that you gave us, Adesua, is resisting. However, Moderna has claimed that they are in fact not resisting, and they're going to spend $500 million building a vaccine hub and what have you in Africa in 2022, although, details are sketchy on that. And the U.S. government is still insisting that that hub that they're claiming they're going to build will probably be more useful for mRNA technology for other diseases, because it's going to take years. And their problem right now is an immediate one. We need a short-term solution, boost your production and supply to Africa. So they're looking pretty bad in terms of, company ethics, even though they're pretending or claiming that they have this plan for Africa. Nobody seems to be convinced by that.
So Moderna has got its own very big problems. Number one, there's that part about cost. Secondly, there's that part about the U.S. government investment. But most importantly, I think what is happening across the globe is production capacity. It is one thing to do the research to get the vaccine out, but it's another thing to generate production capacity. I'll take, for instance, Pfizer. Pfizer had to ramp up production out of Belgium to be able to get their vaccines out. AstraZeneca, the same. That's why they had to use places like India and the likes and all of that, So production capacity is a very big problem around the world. And how they can quickly ramp up the production capacity will be, the game changer in all of this. So yes, Moderna might be looking forward to prioritize those that have money first, which is a sad reality. But the question we should also ask is, do they have the production capacity? I doubt it. And I think that's the problem across board. And that's why they're talking about your mRNA technology setting up in Africa, for further diseases in the world. Because what the mRNA technology has shown all of us is that you can use it for myriads of disease. I mean, we had a breakthrough recently with GSK as regards a malaria vaccine and the likes. But mRNA technology, because of the way technology is structured, is just pretty much a plug-and-play thing. Future investments are good, but we should solve the niggling problem of production capacity now. And I think Moderna should also look at the possibility of bigger production sites out of India. The Serum Institute has the capacity to churn out a lot. I think if Moderna allows the Serum Institute to produce some of their vaccines, then they can meet most of this quota and the like. So it's a big problem of production capacity and not about what they really have on ground. But we'd like to say a very big thank you to you.
The consensus is that Moderna should show responsibility.
Yes.
That it owes commitments to other parts of the world and should not focus only on return on investment. Because, basically it's the main vaccine that they produce. So when the spokesperson for the company talks about supply issues, production capacity, no. Many people have rejected that excuse.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Adiso. I really appreciate you.
And to the point,
okay, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say to the point that Moderna is also making is that they are not known for any other pharmaceutical drugs.
Yes, that's their main product.
But the COVID-19 vaccine, they've never done this before, and so everything boils down to production costs and profit.
Adiso, let's not forget, Moderna was a very small company before COVID. COVID transformed their life X 1 billion.
The U.S. government investment.
COVID just was a very small company.